The Dolans were a prominent family in the history of Bodie, California. Like a lot of Irish who found work as miners, James Samuel Dolan came to the United States in search of a better life. One of his sons, James P. Dolan, was first elected sheriff of Mono County in 1906. A tragic encounter with two criminals in 1915 near Mono Lake placed the young husband and father in a grave. 105 years later, I'll revisit the sites associated with the tragic death of Sheriff Dolan and visit his grave in nearby Bridgeport. This lonely marker over here in what is the Mono Lake picnic area pays homage to Sheriff James Dolan, who was shot and killed not far from here. I'm not sure why they picked this spot right here, but it's in the vicinity of where he was shot and killed. On July 25th, 1915, Sheriff Dolan and his partner were going to check out reports of a rape by two Mexican nationals. They spotted the suspects up there at the store, Hammond store, which we're going to take a look at later. It was there that he was ambushed and he was shot and killed. This little marker here pays homage to the 15th lawman to serve in that office in Mono County. He made the ultimate sacrifice. He had ran for sheriff of Mono County in 1906. He was born in Michigan but raised in Bodie. He was a rancher, assayer, outdoorsman, and spoke Paiute Indian. He attended the University of Nevada. In 1912, he married Cordelia Hayes, Mono County School Superintendent, and they had a daughter in 1913. Her name was Alice. When he was shot on Highway 395, it says that he dragged himself into the bushes. It could have been in this area where he actually was picked up. Dolan was taken to Hammond's store, where doctors from Bridgeport, Bishop, Carson City, and Reno eventually responded and performed emergency surgery. Dolan was able to describe his assailants, and they were able to track them down the next day. It said the two bad guys were shot and killed near Mono Lake here after a posse of about 200 men were formed. A couple of days later, the posse caught up with them. They were resisting, and they were shot to death. They were buried not far from here in coffins made of pine. Today we hear a lot about police officers being shot and killed for no reason, and this is an example of that well over 100 years ago. So in July 1915, this was the site of Hammond's store, now the Tioga Inn. But this is where the sheriff and his assistant drove to meet the witnesses who were calling in about a rape. It is said that the sheriff met the two witnesses here at this store. When they saw the suspects walking by, rather fortuitously, they decided to drive up the road here and pretend like they had car trouble. They popped the hood of their vehicle, and as they did so, when the two suspects walked up to them, they approached them and brought out their guns and asked them to surrender, and then a gunfight ensued. The sheriff was shot and mortally wounded along this section of Highway 395. He was brought back to this hotel where a number of doctors and surgeons from nearby Reno and Carson City and Bridgeport did their best to save his life. However, he passed away. Not sure if he died in this building or if he died elsewhere, but apparently emergency surgery was performed on him. Must have been frightful. Check out the crumbling foundation of rock underneath this building. As I've often said, if those rocks could talk. Sheriff Dolan left a daughter by the name of Alice, who passed away 5 years ago at the age of 101. His wife Cordelia was just 34 years old. It's hard to believe that this serene and tranquil site was witness to a horrific shootout 105 years ago. I read that as he confronted the suspects, his .45 caliber pistol jammed and it wouldn't fire, and he got shot instead. So we understand that the sheriff is buried in Bridgeport, and we're going to try to go find his grave. So we came out to this cemetery in Bridgeport, California. It's north of Lee Vining. We're going to find the grave of James P. Dolan. The 38-year-old sheriff ended up here in the Hayes plot because his wife, Cordelia, was a Hayes. Here's the grave of James P. Dolan, 1876 to 1915. Shot and killed in that shootout just north of Lee Vining, trying to apprehend those two dirtbags. What I think is really curious about this marker is that the granite is of two different colors. It's almost like the dark part represents the evil that overtook his life, and the smooth parts represented the good. There's a crown and a cross right here. James Dolan was born in Houghton County, Michigan on December 23rd, 1876, as the second of 9 children of James and Mary Dolan. The family moved to Bodie, where their house is still standing. Most of the siblings are buried with the parents in Bodie, but James is here. He left behind just one daughter, Alice Marie Dolan. She died in 2015, exactly 100 years after her father was killed. It reads, daughter of Bridgeport, pioneer teacher, historian, consummate character. Alice was born in September 1913, the only child of James and Cordelia Dolan. She died in 2015 at the age of 101. Well, after the tragic death of her father, Cordelia became a school teacher in Aurora, where she remained until the town died out. Then they moved to Palo Alto and later San Francisco, but they spent nearly every summer in Bridgeport. Alice earned her bachelor's degree at Stanford University in 1935 and taught school in Bodie. 8 students showed up the first day, but it said that 9 were required to keep the school open, so 22-year-old school teacher Alice bribed one boy to attend with a quarter. Alice was noted for requiring attendance at school even during severe storms. She remained in Bodie until 1937, when she moved on to teaching positions in Weaverville and Elk Grove. She spent many years at Tamalpais High School in Marin County, where she was the dean of girls and a counselor. So here's the grave of the widow, Cordelia Hayes Dolan, 1881 to 1943. She was cheated out of being with her husband for close to 30 years. Cordelia was the daughter of David and Alice Hayes, right within this plot of the grave of other Hayes children, the siblings of Cordelia. The demise of James P. Dolan is troubling. He was like any other family man who wanted to return home after a long day of work. Perhaps he was looking forward to Cordelia's home-cooked meal that night and bouncing little Alice on his knee. Instead, a pair of selfish criminals decided to make someone else pay for their crime. Sheriff Dolan spent his last hours in agony, his body pierced by a bullet and his life's fluids leaking out into gauze and on tabletop, attended to by doctors far less skilled than today. The sense of loss must have been great for Cordelia to bear. Cordelia never married again. His brother Albert Dolan took over as sheriff and held the post for 23 years until 1938. As far as the two villains of the story go, history hasn't recorded much, only that their names were Teddy Salito and Juan Francisco, and both died in a hail of gunfire because they refused to surrender. It's been noted that they're buried on the little rise between the Matley and Farrington ranches near the shore of Mono Lake. While it's true that 105 years have passed since the death of Sheriff Dolan, 2 buildings associated with his career still stand: the historic jail in Bridgeport and the 1880 Mono County Courthouse, which he had dealings in. The next time you're in Bridgeport, take a little detour off of Highway 395, find the cemetery, and pay respects to a lawman who died far too young, but who gave everything that he had for the security of those in his community.